Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to repot this beautiful Syngonium ice frost, and we get to drill. So let's get started. So I have had this plant in my collection only about 3 months now, 3 months, and I have it still in the plastic pot that I purchased it in. It has really good soil inside of it, but what we're going to do is we are going to finally pot it up in this pot right here, which will not only look nicer, but it'll also provide for some really good aeration, drainage, and a bunch of other things that this plant will love and thrive on, so they say. Who they are, I don't know. But I can tell you this, I have only recently, probably within the last 6 to 10 months, started to get into Syngonium, and I absolutely love this plant. Now, this is the Syngonium macrophyllum ice frost, and you can see why it's called an ice frost, because it has these stunning, frosty looking leaves that are white in variegation in certain parts. It kind of looks like a window is frosting over, and that's where it gets its nickname from. Now, this plant is a beautiful plant and a really easy one to care for. And what I mean by easy is that it's sort of like caring for a pothos or a philodendron, like a heteroecium philodendron, which is the heartleaf philodendron, because it's just not too fussy. In fact, this plant can do well in a multitude of different kind of levels in terms of lighting we're talking about here. And of course, you can put it in a lower light area, but I wouldn't recommend it because it does need bright indirect to really thrive. But you can put it in other medium light areas and so forth, and it will grow, but it might just grow at a little bit of a slower rate. So with this, its leaves, those frosty leaves, they're really thick, they're very leathery. And so you can even give this some dappled sunlight if you want. No indirect sunlight, but maybe a little bit of dappled sunlight. That would help out with it. What's cool about this plant is that it can be used pretty much in a variety of different locations too, because it's one of those showstopper type plants that's really easy to get and easy to care for, and with its beautiful leaves, it can just do well anywhere in your home as long as there's decent lighting. And I can guarantee you this, your guests will absolutely love it. So what I need to do is, because this is an old pot from an old plant that apparently I didn't care for too well, because I only put a little hole inside the bottom of it. And since this is an aeroid and we want to make sure that it doesn't suffocate with the amount of water that we're giving it, we're going to add a few more holes into this pot, which is why we have this. And I have my drill on here that'll just kind of go right through it, hopefully. I haven't used it in one of these pots yet, but here goes nothing. And it's doing its charm just as it should. If you haven't really... Apparently, I am not the most handy of tool men, which you really don't need a video to tell you that. Just ask anybody who knows me. Why we're doing this, though, is that, like I said, we don't want water to kind of lurk up and just kind of sit in there, because, of course, we know that the #1 killer of our houseplants is overwatering. And so many people, including myself early on in my plant journey, tend to overwater their plants. And what happens when you overwater a plant? Well, if you don't have good drainage, like this pot did not have early on, hold on, it will collect that water, and the water will really just kind of sit there at the bottom, which is not good for the plant, because if you have the water just sitting there, chances are its roots are going to suffer, and they're just going to have all that water around them, and then one thing leads to another, and the next thing you know, you don't have your Syngonium macrophyllum frost. So here we are. This is what we are doing this evening, friends. And I have a bunch of other big plant projects I want to do in my home here in Denver, Colorado, but before we get to those, I really wanted to take care of this, because it's starting to get nicer here in the Mile High City, and I want to make sure that with the sunlight coming back finally and not having to deal with as much snow that my plants do have, the best little home that they have. And that doesn't mean my home. That means their home, which would, in this case, for this Syngonium, be this pot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put 4 new holes in it. I've already got 2 down, and we just have 2 more to go. I got in the habit of doing this probably about, gosh, I would say 6 months into when I first started collecting plants a couple years ago. And I really noticed a huge difference with my plants. The amount of growth that so many of them have seen because the fact that they're in a well-draining pot, it is just insane. I mean, you can tell. I mean, if you were a plant, let's say, and well, you know what? We'll just go with being a human. Let's say if you were inside your home and you couldn't open up the windows to get any air, or you had no like air purifiers or good circulation, you wouldn't be too comfortable, would you? No. And you don't really want to have to deal with that as a plant when you're dealing with the soil that you're living in. I like to use a well-draining aeroid mix. And fortunately, the plant shop that I bought this at had just that. And I'm just going to reuse the soil that this plant is already in so it can familiarize itself with it and already just kind of know what it wants and know that it's comfortable in that kind of environment. And so what do I mean by a well-draining aeroid soil? Well, aeroids are Araceae, which fall under the same classification or family as philodendron, epiprenum, which is pothos, monstera, all of those fun, beautiful plants that so many of us have. And they like the roots to be able to move around, to be able to breathe, and to not have soil that is really just kind of like holding on to that moisture and holding them back from being able to have those roots that just kind of are able to go anywhere they want. And so this particular soil that's inside this plastic pot right now is a nice mix, and it has a bunch of cocoa coir. It has, perlite, worm castings, which is really great for plants in terms of their growth. And it has orchid bark as well as some activated charcoal. And the activated charcoal is wonderful because what that does is it helps fight off any fungus or bacterial infection that could impact your plants. And that's another big thing that us plant parents have to deal with. All right, you know what? We're going to go with 3 holes because these 3 are big now. And it's kind of like a bowling ball. I like that. So what I'm going to do now is, this is really simple. Now, if I didn't have this plant in good soil that I wanted to transfer it into this pot, I would make it myself and then go about make the base layer like you folks have seen in other videos. But with this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take out these rocks and crystals that are holding up its moss pole, and I'm going to put them off to the side and just start kind of putting this plant inside of there. Yes, I put crystals inside my plants because I want them to be healthy and be spiritually well. Is that too much to ask? Probably. I like it though. What's really neat about this plant too is that it is a tropical plant, a rainforest plant. So it doesn't need like crazy humidity, but of course, if you have good humidity, it will thrive and it will grow much larger, which is absolutely stunning. And that's what you want to see and make sure that your plants are super healthy. Now I have a trash bag down here because I don't want to get any on my floor, which I will regardless. And then I'll just sweep it up afterwards. So I'm going to just kind of loosen up the sides of this pot like so, just by squeezing gently around its sides. I say squeezing gently, even though I'm like squeezing in on this thing as much as I can. And I hadn't watered this thing in a week, and it still has a little bit of moist soil, which is another sign, obviously, of having a plant that is, woohoo, yeah, so much for being able to keep this thing clean, right? I'm going to take some of this soil out just so I can have a base layer in there, and then I'll pot it back up. But yeah, even though I haven't watered in a week, this plant it still has this moist soil, and that's because of the fact that it's inside of this plastic container here. Plastic does not, it holds on to that moisture, and that's not something that we want. Wow, that root system's beautiful. This is my first time seeing the roots, and they are lovely. Just divine, I would say. So now I'm going to take this, and I might actually, you know what? Hold your horses for just a second, because I still have some of my rooting hormone powder, which I will use to transfer this plant. I just don't want to have it tip. Clearly, I wasn't prepared for this video, but that's okay. It goes with my theme of not being prepared for life. Well, guess who found the rooting hormone powder? I did, because I knew exactly where I left it. So now we are going to use this, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and not touch the roots, because that's one thing. We don't want to disturb the roots by any means, because as I said in past videos, you can consider them to be like the plant's brain, and the plant itself, its leaves and so forth, would be kind of like its head, its hair. That's where it collects all the energy and photosynthesizes by the sunlight, and looks really beautiful. Okay, I think that's enough rooting hormone powder. Kevin, don't waste it all. Stuff's expensive. All right, so now I'm just going to make sure gently that these roots get into this pot, and let's move this out of the way. And now we are going to put this gently into here. You'll notice that I have a moss pole in the middle of this plant. And you might be asking yourself, well, Kevin, why do you have a moss pole? The answer is because this plant, like I said, is an aroid. And like other aroids in nature, it can be hemiepiphytic. And what is hemiepiphytic? Well, that means that this plant spends part of its life growing on the sides of other plants or trees. So while it might start in the soil, eventually, like in the jungle, it would start to climb up a tree, hence the moss pole, something to replicate it. And in doing so, when it starts to climb up the tree, it shoots out aerial roots from its side. And you can see some of the aerial roots here on this plant, and some of them are getting pretty long, actually. And aerial roots will latch on to the side of the tree, or the moss pole for this matter, and they will start sucking up energy in terms of like if there's any moisture, condensation that tends to like pop up on the plant or on the tree, and it allows the plant to really just grow stronger. And so when you see those aerial roots, they might not always be the prettiest, especially on like monsteras, but the fact of the matter is that they are providing so much more energy to help this plant thrive. And so what I'm doing now is I'm starting to pot up around the side of these roots and in the plant itself, in the pot itself, I should say, to make sure that this plant is getting an adequate amount of soil. You'll notice I'm shaking it too, and that's because we have all of those roots that are like a very disorganized cable system or wiring system underneath the soil. And I want to make sure that the soil is getting wrapped around those roots, so you know the plant can move around, its roots can do its thing, and all will be happy in this world, right? Yeah. All right, so now I have, I think, pretty much maybe just a few more scoops. I pretty much used up all of the soil on this, so that's good. And you'll notice that I really didn't, even in reusing this pot, I chose it because I've had it sitting in my closet for, gosh, I think a couple months now, or a couple weeks. And I used it because it was very similar in size to this plant's original plastic pot that it was growing in. And it's not like that pot was running out of room. And so you really don't want to give your plant, like let's say, for instance, if you have a plant that only has like 6-inch roots, you don't want to give it a pot that's, gosh, maybe like 12 inches deep, because then you have 6-inch roots that go down 6 inches, and then you have 6 inches below it that is completely just filled with soil. So when, for instance, you water it, all that wet soil is going to stick to the bottom instead of just drying out. This way you can have a healthier plant by making sure that the pot size is adequate. So I think that we accomplished our mission here. Look at that. I really like the pot. What I'm going to do is, since I don't need to water this plant, since the soil is a little bit moist still, I'm just going to go over to the sink and I am going to clean off the soil that I got around the side. And then apparently, according to this mess, I'm going to have to clean up my living room floor. But this is the Syngonium macrophyllum frost. And I'm so excited that I finally got around to actually potting this up from since I purchased it. And yeah, I just want to say, like always, guys, you folks are awesome, and I so appreciate your support and the fact that you tune into my videos and you check them out. If you haven't already, please give this video a thumbs up, and also if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do so. It really helps out a lot, and plus you'll get to see more cool and fun content like this when it comes to plant care. Thanks for watching, folks, and I'll see you in the next video.